Today, the remains of Jozef Tiso occupy a tomb in Nitra Cathedral. A faction of modern Slovak society still designates him a holy martyr. Historical reality contradicts this. How did a state criminal secure a reburial in the main cathedral? Sympathizers executed the exhumation quietly. Workers excavated the original plot. They extracted the skeletal remains. Handlers transferred the bones to Nitra Cathedral. They positioned the coffin directly within the sacred space. The cold stone of the cathedral now legitimizes a convicted collaborator. This public veneration generates a severe sociological dissonance. A specific demographic elevates him to saint status. In direct contrast, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum registers 60,000 murdered citizens resulting from his executive policies. 60,000 exterminated individuals equal the entire population of a modern mid-sized European city. The Wilson Center verifies this demographic collapse. Independent historians maintain a strict academic consensus. They reject the martyrdom hypothesis. Researchers classify his administration as an active apparatus for state-sponsored extermination. Tiso secured a ceremonial sanctuary. Tens of thousands of his regime's victims never received official graves. The state originally targeted the corpse currently enshrined in the Nitra Cathedral for total historical erasure. In the spring of 1947, authorities planned to hide the body forever. April 18, 1947. Bratislava, the Palace of Justice courtyard. Jozef Tiso approached the gallows. He wore the full black vestments of a Catholic priest. This attire functioned as a calculated visual strategy, a deliberate signal to his political base. He held a heavy metal crucifix. The object clinked sharply against his grip with each step up the wooden stairs. President Edvard Benes rejected all appeals for clemency. The condemned convict openly claimed the status of a national martyr. No final words. He offered zero statements regarding the 60,000 dead. He maintained absolute silence about the 997 teenage girls deported on the initial train. The execution protocol required a standard long drop. The executioner pulled the lever. The trap door released. A critical mechanical failure followed. The kinetic force of the fall failed to sever the spinal cord. Instead of causing an instantaneous cervical fracture, the flawed drop initiated a prolonged asphyxiation sequence. The 59-year-old former leader slowly strangled at the end of the rope. Post-execution logistics presented an immediate political hazard. A marked burial site would inevitably function as a shrine for extremist factions. State officials sought to systematically suppress the emerging personality cult. To neutralize this ideological threat, the Czechoslovak government executed a covert operation and buried the remains in absolute secrecy. Before the execution in Bratislava, the former state leader initiated a systematic evasion protocol. He attempted to vanish among Bavarian monks under a fabricated identity. In the spring of 1945, he crossed the border. He assumed the alias Dr. Joseph Taborski. He secured refuge inside a Capuchin monastery in Altading. The evasion collapsed. American military personnel identified and extracted him in June 1945. The judicial proceedings commenced on December 2, 1946. What did the defendant answer to the direct question of the tribunal about the possible repetition of his actions? He testified he would execute the exact same policies. The trial exposed a structural clash between undeniable physical evidence and absolute psychological detachment. Prosecutors projected film reels from liberated concentration camps directly into the courtroom. Mass graves, skeletal survivors, operational gas chambers. The defendant maintained complete visual disconnect. He stared strictly at the floor. He systematically refused to condemn the extermination apparatus. His defense strategy utilized cold legal calculation. Expressing moral remorse, he argued, would constitute a formal confession of guilt. Chief Justice Igor Daxner based the judgment exclusively on signed state directives. This conscious refusal to express remorse before the tribunal would later become the primary justification argument for modern radical groups. On April 15, 1947, the Czechoslovak National Court delivered the final legal qualification. The tribunal convicted him of treason and crimes against humanity. These deported citizens constituted more than two-thirds of the entire pre-war Jewish population of Slovakia. The ultimate judicial verdict documented his direct authorization for the deportation of nearly 58,000. By the autumn of 1944, the social collapse of the nation was absolute. The state had already physically annihilated 60,000 citizens. How does a head of state react to the annihilation of his own citizens? On October 30th, 1944, he personally decorates their executioners. Officials prepared the stage in Banska Bystrica for a public military ceremony. A Catholic priest stepped onto the podium. He approached a rigid line of officers. Among them stood Oskar Derlewanger. He commanded a specialized SS penal brigade. His entire service record consisted of punitive operations against unarmed populations. The government ignored this data. The priest raised his hands. The metallic click of the order's pin sounded against the fabric of the German uniform. 60,000 murdered and 70,000 deported civilians. This death toll triggered a systemic social rupture. The volume of victims equaled the entire population of a major Slovak city like Trnava. A whole urban demographic vanished. Clerical authority provided direct moral cover for this extermination process. Official state registers confirmed the total physical absence of two-thirds of the pre-war Jewish population. Before Oskar Derlewanger received his military decoration, Jozef Tiso's administration systematically ignored documentary evidence of mass extermination for 2 consecutive years. The official labeling of the deportation pause cited political pressure. The real reason was transparent. 24,000 remaining Jews were critically important for the functioning of the economy. In autumn 1942, the Vatican representative delivered a direct diplomatic briefing. The papal nuncio explicitly informed the Slovak leadership about the systemic execution of deported taxpayers. The executive branch possessed absolute factual awareness. Extermination became an established data point. They knew the exact logistics. By April 1944, authorities processed the Verba-Wetzler report. This 32-page document provided precise architectural schematics of the extermination infrastructure. The intelligence dossier detailed the exact locations of gas chambers and active crematoria. State officials reviewed the structural blueprints of mass murder. The state apparatus evaluated these intelligence briefings through a strict bureaucratic framework. Citizens lost their basic social identity. Human survival depended entirely on industrial utility. The domestic market required a specialized workforce to maintain baseline production metrics. Ethics played zero role. State ministries categorized the surviving demographic by their daily professional output. The government issued presidential exceptions for economically profitable citizens. The state had already stripped the 24,000 individuals temporarily preserved for economic output of their fundamental civil rights. The bureaucratic blueprint copied the Nuremberg legislation. The isolation began with administrative routine. The dry clack of typewriter keys recorded the new legal clauses. It was September 1941. The parliament enacted the Jewish Code. Segregation entered daily life. Citizens lost access to public parks. Local authorities barred them from social clubs. Municipalities strictly restricted their shopping hours. The government systematically dismantled their civil existence through local ordinances. Why would a state pay to murder its own taxpayers? Slovakia transferred 10 million Reichsmarks to the Third Reich under the guise of a retraining fee. Between March and October 1942, the logistics of extermination became a formalized state service. 57 transports departed Slovak territory. The government did not merely permit this demographic removal, administrators actively financed it. Clerks processed the administrative receipts. They filled out standard municipal forms for every deported individual. They stamped the sum of 500 Reichsmarks next to each name. A department official signed the final authorization. This fixed tariff per deported citizen transformed human elimination into a standard international transaction. The capital transfer effectively subsidized the Third Reich's military apparatus directly from the Slovak national budget. The treasury finalized the total payment, 10 million Reichsmarks. The first victims of this state-funded bureaucratic machine in March 1942 were not prisoners of war. They were 997 young Slovak women. State organs issued standard legal summons. The official pretext was labor conscription. Authorities instructed unmarried citizens to report for mandatory factory and farm work. The government formally guaranteed their safety. Families trusted the official stamps. They followed the written instructions without resistance. Mothers helped pack the required luggage. Carefully folded dress clothes and books filled the suitcases of the deceived girls. Families packed their daughters for agricultural work, unaware that by the end of the year, 92% of them would be dead. The state maintained the legal illusion until the final boarding process. Conscripts expected standard passenger trains. Guards directed them into empty freight wagons instead. Zuzana Vesela stepped into one of these designated cars. Soldiers secured the exterior locks. The train rolled east and stopped at the Auschwitz selection ramp. Officials confiscated the luggage immediately. The labor contracts were a complete fiction. Their civilian lives ended there. Who orchestrated the departure of the first mass death train? Inside one of these sealed wagons heading to Auschwitz, a 17-year-old girl stood in the dark. State railway workers boarded up the wagon windows, leaving only a narrow slit for air circulation. The primary architect of this logistics chain was not a military general. It was the elected president and Catholic priest, Jozef Tiso. The deportations began in March 1942. 997 women formed the initial transport. Guards locked the exterior doors. Ministry officials allocated one bucket for drinking water. They provided a second metal bucket as a single toilet for 98 passengers. A suffocating smell of human waste immediately saturated the closed space. Air circulation failed. The temperature spiked. Distance shielded the chief executive from the physical reality of his decisions. The transport protocols originated in an immaculate governmental cabinet. The leader commanded absolute moral authority over the state. He did not hear the iron doors. He did not smell the freight cars. He only saw demographic data. Jozef Tiso reviewed the final administrative paperwork on his desk. He took his pen. The president signed the official dispatch order. The machine of state terror in the 1940s did not materialize out of nowhere. Radical leaders systematically embedded it into the political vacuum left by the collapse of 4 empires after the First World War. In October 1918, politicians formed the Czechoslovak Republic, a new democratic project, but structurally compromised. How did a priest manage to subordinate an entire state? The answer lies in the demographic crisis of 1918. The newly drawn borders ignored ethnic realities. The government failed to forge a unified national identity. 50% Czech, 22% German, 16% Slovak. This objective demographic imbalance generated an immediate social conflict. Different factions competed for representation. Total political distrust defined the society. Jozef Tiso recognized the utility of this fracture. In December 1918, he joined the Slovak People's Party. The Catholic priest Andrej Hlinka had founded this right-wing clerical movement to monopolize national grievances. Tiso discarded traditional political rhetoric. He utilized religious asceticism to secure the trust of the masses. By 1927, he secured the position of Minister of Health. Government officials assigned him a spacious, fully furnished ministerial apartment in Prague. Tiso refused the keys. He relocated to a local monastery instead. Bare stone walls, a narrow wooden cot, the damp smell of cold plaster in a cramped cell. From this austere room, the minister reviewed public health policies and drafted legislation. The visual contrast served a precise function. Tiso presented himself as a humble servant of the population. He physically separated his persona from the secular elite. This constructed social image bypassed public skepticism. When Hlinka died, Tiso rapidly assumed full leadership of the movement. International diplomacy then accelerated the internal collapse. European powers signed the Munich Agreement. They stripped the republic of its borders and dismantled the state architecture without consulting the local population. The central government fractured. Tiso leveraged the resulting chaos. On March 14, 1939, Jozef Tiso formally declared Slovak independence. He immediately outlawed opposition factions and established a one-party system. 25 years before dictating state policy, the exact same cleric analyzed mass death in the trenches. In the summer of 1914, military command mobilized the 71st Infantry Regiment of the Austro-Hungarian Army. The unit consisted almost entirely of Slovak soldiers. Supply lines failed immediately. Summer storms turned the trenches into stagnant mud pits. Field hospitals operated without basic sanitation. Surgeons amputated infected limbs on bare wooden tables. Dysentery swept through the infantry. Mortality rates spiked. Tiso served as the regimental chaplain. He administered last rites. He documented the daily attrition in a personal journal. He did not record trauma. He recorded a sociological experiment. Extreme deprivation erased regional divisions among the troops. Constant artillery fire leveled social classes. The absolute destruction of human life provided a functional political framework. Theological protocols dictate that a priest must condemn such slaughter. Instead, Tiso explicitly defined the carnage as a morally purifying fire necessary for collective discipline. The industrial scale of death did not repel him. It validated violence as a legitimate mechanism for social control. Army medical boards discharged him from the front due to severe kidney disease at the end of 1914. The future architect of state terror began his career fighting poverty. But the concept of social cleansing formed long before the trenches of 1914. It took root in the daily routine of the Slovak province. Where did the foundation of this radical ideology originate? From ordinary social welfare programs. Stanford biographer James Mace Ward documented this paradox. The young priest sought progress for the rural working class. October 13, 1887, marked his birth in Botched. The provincial market town sat deep within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The smell of stale beer, damp wood, and cheap tobacco saturated the local taverns. Tiso contrasted this chaos with the cold stone and absolute silence of Catholic discipline. Imperial laws often granted Jewish leaseholders control over the rural alcohol trade. This economic reality generated daily social friction. Slovak workers drank away their wages. Tiso observed the degradation. He blamed the tavern owners. He launched a counter-economy. Tiso organized credit unions. He established Catholic cooperatives. The financial mechanism operated with brutal efficiency. Slovak peasants pooled their meager funds to open their own grocery stores, systematically bypassing Jewish merchants and starving them of capital. He engineered this economic isolation deliberately. Jewish businesses lost their rural customer base. Revenue dried up. Social work became a practical tool for ethnic segregation. Poverty relief masked economic warfare. The University of Vienna provided his academic validation. The local bishop recognized his strict discipline and sent him to the imperial capital in 1960s. Tiso absorbed conservative theological doctrines. He codified his socio-economic prejudices into a rigid belief system. The transformation from provincial social worker to ideological hardliner concluded with his doctorate. He received the degree in 1911.